On December 23rd, 1998, Cirque du Soleil opened the show La Nouba at downtown Dizney, now Disney Springs. It became a staple of the dining, shopping, and entertainment district for just over 19 years when it played its final performance on December 31st, 2017. At that time, Disney fans had no idea what would replace this long-running production. Almost 4 years later, Cirque du Soleil's Drawn to Life opened in the same venue at Disney Springs on November 18th, 2021. This new production features everything audiences know, love, and expect from Cirque du Soleil, but this time it features a lot of your favorite Disney characters with an unprecedented collaboration between Cirque du Soleil and Walt Disney Animation Studios. I had the pleasure of experiencing Drawn to Life on my most recent trip to Walt Disney World. Joining me to discuss Drawn to Life are a couple of talented folks who work on the production. A bit later, you'll hear from Andreanne Nadeau, one of the performers in the show. But first, I chat with the show's artistic director, Justin Sullivan. Working on Drawn to Life is a homecoming of sorts for Justin, as he was also part of La Nouba. During our conversation, you'll hear all about the responsibilities of the artistic director and the unbelievable lengths that are gone to in order to make each performance the best it can possibly be. The folks at Drawn to Life are nothing if not passionate for their work. Enjoy my conversation with Justin, followed by my conversation with Andreanne.
Prepare for some insight. You've tuned in to an exclusive DCTC interview.
Hello, Justin, and welcome to Disney Coast to Coast. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I'm excited to talk to you about Drawn to Life. As you know, I had the chance to see it finally when I was in Orlando this past October, and I truly loved the show.
I'm new to the show. I have been with Cirque for 22 years, but Drawn to Life, I am a new Drawn to Lifer. I've been with the show about 2.5 months.
Okay, so what others, 22 years, I'm sure it was a lot of shows, but what are some of the other Cirque shows that you were part of?
I did Alegria, the first Alegria. There's a second Alegria 2, I guess you would say the working title, but Alegria, the second iteration. I was on the original Alegria, and then La Nouba, and then a touring show called Kuza, then back to La Nouba, and then I did some special events for Cirque and a project they do called Chemin Invisible, and then Love in Las Vegas, then Curios, a touring show that was in Japan, and at the time it was in Japan. Then I did Cirque's first resident show in mainland China, X-Land of Fantasy. And then when the pandemic hit, I took a bit of a hiatus from entertainment and was actually a mortgage loan processor. And then back to Cirque now with Drawn to Life.
Wow. Okay. I'm impressed that you knew all that right off the top of your head. It's quite the resume of Cirque shows right there. All right. So for folks who may not know, what exactly is the role of an artistic director?
So the artistic director is in charge of ensuring the overall artistic integrity of and quality of the show each night. So on any Cirque show, during the creation process, there is a production team of original conceptors, designers, choreographers, dance choreographers, acting coaches, the whole 9 yards, everyone that would be there to put on the show. And basically, they're working in tandem with the operations team. So the production team comes in with the concept. A lot of it is developed in Montreal. And then when they are complete with their work and the show premieres, they hand over the show to operations. And I'm on the operations team. And so the artistic director's job is to ensure that the director's vision is constantly being recognized, being respected, that we're not veering away from the original concept of the show, while also navigating the complexities and nuances of doing a show 10 times a week, 472 times a year. Many times the production teams have incredible, beautiful ideas that are great in concept, but they might only be achievable 3 times a week, not 10 times a week. So my job is helping to bridge that gap to make sure that we have replacements cast on time. Their client mark. There's a lot of background coordination and administrative work that does go into this role. It's interesting. I was an artist before, and transition from artist to management. And there are a lot of other artists that are like, being an artistic director, would love to do it. It's so much fun. It seems so great to create. And yes, creation is a portion of my job for sure, but there is a large administrative piece behind the scenes that does see me in my office quite often, making projections, scheduling workshops, making plans for the show for the next year, like I touched upon earlier, integration plans, when the artist would arrive, how long we think it will take them to get into the show, and then what that process would be.
Wow. So you said that you worked on Nouba, which of course is the show, the Cirque du Soleil show that originated at Disney Springs. At the time, I believe it was called Downtown Disney.
Downtown Disney, yes.
Yeah. So that ran from December of 98 through December of 2017. So a 19-year run. So you did Nouba for a long time. You come into the space. It's now drawn to life. Was it a bit of a weird kind of homecoming for you to see the space with this new show?
Yes, very different. I describe it to someone as if you went to your hometown and you drove up to the house you grew up in and you knocked on the front door and you're like, hey, do you mind if I just take a peek inside? And they open the door and it's the house you grew up in, but there's new paint colors, or they took down a wall and expanded the living room so that it's open up to the kitchen. So it definitely has the bones of Nouba, but a complete facelift and update. It's been a beautiful process to be back in this building. There are people that worked on Nouba when I was on Nouba that are part of the crew here at Drawn to Life. So it's nice to see some familiar faces around the building, and also really beautiful to see a theater that was, a signature piece in the crown of Cirque du Soleil Nouba for so many years, now kind of passing the reins over to Drawn to Life to be that new signature piece in the crown of Cirque du Soleil. And what they've done with the theater is pretty extraordinary. For people that knew Nouba well, they will feel the same feeling, I think, walking in going, okay, I know this space, but wow, it looks quite a bit different.
Yeah, and it was also interesting for me because I remember seeing Nouba, I think, as a teenager, so it was a long time ago. And when I walked in for Drawn to Life, I mean, just the lobby alone got this whole fresh redo with like Walt Disney animation sketches, like oversized on the walls and stuff. And I was like, oh, okay, like they made... The theater was made for Nouba, right? Like it didn't exist before Nouba. It was built from the ground up for Nouba. So when a new show comes in and takes it over, it's like a little bit of a challenge, I would imagine, to make it its own. But it does the second you walk into the lobby, I felt.
For sure. And that's what's really important on any Cirque du Soleil show. When it's a custom built theater for a show, as you said, all the pieces are geared to really highlight and tailor that specific show. And this was a theater built for Nouba. However, with Drawn to Life, they did a great job of looking at the building top to bottom, every inch, and working to make sure that it was tailored to Drawn to Life and really integrate some pretty incredible and impressive elements of Walt Disney animation into your entire experience. This show is called A Love Letter to Animation, and that's highlighted throughout the show when you see it, and then throughout the experience as you enter the lobby and you're getting your snacks and heading to your seat, you really feel that animation presence around you from the moment you enter.
Do you happen to know, were there any major changes made to the theater in order to, work for Drawn to Life, or did they kind of tailor make it to fit into the space that Nouba already used?
I think there was a bit of both. If you remember Nouba, there were 4 lifts on the stage, 4 very large lifts, I think that can go up to a height of 16 feet. They chose to eliminate 2 of those lifts, but keep 2. So we do have 2 of the original Nouba lifts in. There are new components that cover up the proscenium, lots of new rigging elements in this show that weren't a piece of Nouba. But again, it was more taking the structure of what was there and giving it a facelift and remodeling to suit the needs of Drawn to Life.
I'm going to assume that when they announced the closure of Nouba, it was already known behind the scenes that another Cirque du Soleil show is going to come in, correct?
Correct.
Okay, because it was like a secret to the public for a long time. And I remember just as a fan, like wondering, oh my gosh, like Nouba's been such a staple of Disney Springs for such a long time, and thinking, are they going to bring in like a Disney Broadway musical or something like that? So it was interesting and surprising, a little bit surprising to hear that another Cirque show was coming, and exciting to hear that they were kind of working the Disney brand into it. And I'm curious, do you happen to know, was that something that like Cirque wanted to do and they reached out to Disney and said, hey, can we use some of your properties? Or was it more of a Disney thing saying, hey, we love having you guys here, but can we make it more Disney centric?
I'm not sure. At the time, I was an artist in Cirque when La Nouba was closing, and they were working on the plans for what was to be done with the theater here on Disney Springs property. So I wasn't involved with any of the managerial meetings discussing that and what the transition process might look like. I don't know who was the first person to say, hey, in our next collaboration, we really want to make it a more visible and more cohesive collaboration of Cirque and Disney, where it is a Cirque du Soleil show with these incredible Disney moments highlighting both companies. I don't know what that process was, but I think the end product is definitely something pretty spectacular where it is a Cirque du Soleil show. It does have Disney elements throughout the entire show, and you really feel this marrying of the two companies. Whereas La Nouba was a pure Cirque du Soleil show on Disney property, this is a Cirque du Soleil show on Disney property that has a strong Disney heart beating throughout the show.
Can you feel the difference? I mean, you've been involved with both shows now. Do you feel a difference from the audience?
What I find so beautiful about this show is it's touching. And for people that know Disney well, the nostalgia factor is undeniable. There are little hints to Disney films in the music throughout the show. There are animation projections where you see specific images that you remember. I remember being a little boy curled up in a blanket with my sister on a Saturday morning, watching these classic Disney films. And so I think when you see those images and hear those sounds paired with dazzling acrobatics and the theatrics of Cirque du Soleil, it drives it home a little more. Also, this is a very story driven show, a beautiful story about a young girl who, unfortunately, her father has passed. He was an animator for Disney, and he left her his last animation. And her journey is to complete that animation so that the lines she draws will connect to his and they'll be connected for all eternity. And so then she's on this journey through the world of animation to complete her father's work. And I think that overarching storyline combined with the nostalgia of Disney and the feeling that people get when they watch a Cirque du Soleil show, the wow factor, really makes this show something very unique to the Cirque du Soleil Entertainment Group brand. The two partners worked and still work very, very closely together to ensure that both brands are represented in a way that is representative of the companies and the message they want to project with this show. I don't know what original concepts were discussed and how they ended up at this specific idea of our Julie character having a journey through the world of animation to be reconnected with her father. I don't know how that was arrived upon, but I think it was an excellent move because I do think, and I hope you felt the same way, that it's a very touching story and a very complete story that marries the two very well.
Yeah, no, I would agree. And I think it's one of the stronger like stories I mean, I certainly haven't seen every Cirque show that exists, but of the ones I've seen, this is one of like the stronger stories, and that's a real through line of the entire thing. So it's a really beautiful piece for sure. And when it comes to the different acts in the show, this is obviously like a tough show and you said 10 times a week. So is the cast kind of revolving, or how does that work?
So the way it works that makes Cirque a little bit different from maybe like a Broadway show is that we have a set number of artists in our show and a set number of artists in each act. For instance, the rhythmic gymnastics act, there are 6 gentlemen that perform that act. There are 6 that do it. If unfortunately we're not able to have all 6 in the show that night, then we'd rework the number to have 5. If there's a main character in the show that might not be able to perform that night, we typically have someone else within the show that is trained as their backup, and they will then perform that role. Or we have on-call artists that we will call and say, if you're available tonight, kind of like a swing, please, can you come in and be the role of Miss Hesitation, for example, for that evening? And so that's how we're backing up the show internally to keep the show running as smoothly as possible. Also, within what do we call a house troupe act, like a group number, those acts are typically built for a specific number of people, and then the company will have a buffer inside that number where there are contingency factors to make sure that let's say unfortunately someone is out that evening, we're always then able to put on the fullest number possible.
That's so fascinating. I mean, that must be kind of stressful before each performance. And I know that it's very typical for replacements and stuff to happen in theater, but this is very specific talents that these performers have, right? Like, these are gymnasts and very specific. So that must be a tough thing. And how often, like, what percentage do you think is like the core cast is on stage like exactly as it was meant to be represented, as opposed to some sort of swing or one less performer or something like that?
It is a little bit daunting, but it's also very exciting. It's one of the most exciting parts of the job, in my opinion, is sorting out each night, how are we going to make this the absolute best show possible? And what we're very lucky to have is so many incredibly talented people and creative people that are there to problem solve. And our stage management team, our technical team, really do an amazing job of collaborating together to troubleshoot and figure out, okay, we can't do this, but we can do this. Or we typically do this with this amount of people. We can absolutely do it with this amount of people. I think it's a testament to the talent that we're hiring on the show. So we also have a very regimented and strong program to help ensure the fitness, the health, the safety of our artists. We have a full-time head coach on the show. We have a strength and conditioning program, a coach that runs programs for the artists. We have what we call performance medicine, a team of physical therapists, athletic trainers that are constantly there to help secure the artists' health and safety, to help them rehabilitate if they're coming back from an injury, to give them preventative care. And those teams in place, as well as myself, stage management, looking at rotations, something called a cue load, where you might see someone in the rhythmic gymnastics number, and then you might see someone later in the swing to swing number. But what you might not know is you're also seeing them throughout the entire show in cue roles and small character moments that are happening upstage and downstage. So many of those roles are rotated, where maybe one day it's an Icarian Games boy that's doing a specific track, and the next day it's a teeterboard boy doing that same track in his place. And so with that, there are rotations in place to help ensure that workload is evenly distributed, no one's being overworked, with the intention always that we're making sure they're in a good place to be at full in their act. So I would say, to answer your question, it is very, very high on the percentage side that you are seeing the most full show possible every single night with the people that are intended to be in the show, based on all the protocols and standards that we have from performance medicine, coaching, stage management, myself, and technical.
That's really fascinating, though. I mean, that sounds like quite a puzzle to figure out when things, are a slightly off for one night. And it's really impressive. One of my favorite things to do when it comes to live entertainment is, if it's a show I've seen many, many times and I kind of just know exactly how it's supposed to go, is I love, and actually I do this in Disney parks quite a bit with their live shows, is I love that moment when I see, okay, something's not the way it's supposed to be. And I immediately look at the audience to see if other people are recognizing this. And listen, the great majority of the time, nobody notices. If it's their first time seeing it, they don't know what they're missing. But, there is that possibility of, oh, it went so wrong that, everybody knows. But like most of the time people don't. But I always find it fascinating just because it's such a puzzle to figure out. And that's live entertainment, right? That's why we love live entertainment.
Absolutely. And that is where a huge portion of my job is, to do exactly that, so that the audience has zero clue that anything has changed, anything is different, and ideally it is the same show in terms of what is supposed to be happening on stage, with the number of people, the length of the act, the number of acts in the show, every single night, 10 times a week, 472 times a year. And that if there are small pieces that do need to be adjusted, we're adjusting it in a way that stays true to the original concept of the show and to the character of the show, so that unless you had seen the show 40 times and knew every slight nuance, you might not realize. You think, okay, maybe, but it looked the same, so I'm not quite sure.
Yeah. Like, what time are you trying to figure out those puzzle pieces? Is it early in the day you get kind of that note of, hey, there's going to be changes tonight? Or does it come like, oh, an hour before showtime, let's get to work?
It can happen both ways. So ideally, like before meeting you for this podcast, let's see, what time did it start this morning? we have an update group message that starts chiming in very early in the day so that we can then ensure that we are all on board to organize everything appropriately. So we started organizing things this morning at around 9 o'clock, and our first show of the day is at 5:30. So we start making plans early in the morning. That way we know if someone might not be available, we're alerting the people in their group, okay, so and so is not available today. Here's what we need to do to make sure that we have all the images accounted for and we have a plan going into trainings to make it work.
It's so impressive. Absolutely wild. How does Drawn to Life differ from other Cirque du Soleil productions, other than just, the use of Disney characters and such? What makes it different?
Well, I think you touched on it earlier, and it's not to say that all Cirque du Soleil shows don't have a story. They do. Sometimes the story is a bit more open to interpretation or something that is a little vague that you walk away going, wow, that was incredible, but I didn't quite get it. But I interpret it this way and I love it. That's, I think, something that people really love about Cirque is that it's not a story handed to them. Many times it's being able to interpret the story on your own. This show definitely has a story that is immediately identifiable. It's relatable. It's something that brings people together. And it's something that I think really strikes a beautiful chord within everyone to appreciate family, to appreciate a journey, to appreciate a legacy. And with that, you said, yes, that an obvious difference is the partnership with Disney, but the magic of Disney is 100% present in this show. And it makes it completely different where it will bring people to tears many times. There's one moment specifically in the show that many nights people are crying because it's just so beautiful. Something that is so important for a show is rhythm, where you have very high level, high energy moments that get the crowd excited, and then maybe a small dip to bring everyone back down to recover from this jaw-dropping act that they just saw and really being on the edge of their seats. And Drawn to Life does an amazing job of balancing that with a through thread, and on top of that, really driving home the emotional impact and beautiful touching moments. It's one of my favorite things of a show when you just have moments that you go, oh my goodness, that is so beautiful. And not just visually, you feel it. And I think it's a show that really makes you feel.
I'm curious. The music box moment is what got me. The little music box and then the giant projections that come out.
Oh, yes.
And that's the moment that really got me. But I'm curious, you said there's a moment that every night kind of you get that feeling from the audience. What moment are you speaking of?
So, not to give too much away, we'd love for all of your listeners to come see the show, but there is a moment where the mother is remembering her relationship with her husband.
Okay, yes.
And she remembers in her mind the way they used to dance in a ballroom. And there's an allusion to a Disney film of two characters dancing in a ballroom that then lead to multiple princes and princesses and these beautiful love stories of Disney characters dancing. And so we start with the mother remembering this with her father, and then she and the father actually have this beautiful dance. I'm using air quotations because it's a Cirque du Soleil dance, amplified for sure. And at the end of it, the father disappears and vanishes back into her memory because he has passed. And so she's reconnecting with him through dance and remembering this beautiful time and love story they had.
I'm going to say something completely honestly about Drawn to Life that no BS here. I've seen a good handful of Cirque du Soleil shows, and most of them I leave and I'm very satisfied, but I don't have this grand desire to go and repeat the same show. It happened once with Cirque for me at Ka. I'm sure you've seen Ka.
Yes.
Love that show. I've seen it multiple times, but I had that feeling when I left Drawn to Life. I was like, I want to see this one again. And I think that that's just a really impressive, feat to see a live show and be like, you know what, I want to see that one more time,
That's amazing to hear, and that's what we want to achieve with everyone coming to see the show. What is interesting that just happened recently, we had one of Cirque du Soleil's, I would say, undeniably, she is the number one fan of any Cirque du Soleil fan in the world. She travels around the world. She has 2 chunks of her year where she devotes an entire bit in the summer to going all over Europe and Asia and seeing every Cirque du Soleil show that's playing on those continents. And then a second chunk in the fall where she comes to North America and she sees every show in Vegas, every show that has a resident location, Hoya, which is in Mexico, Drawn to Life in Orlando, and then any touring show that's happening. And she doesn't see the show just once. She sees the show 10 times, and she will watch the show maybe 4 times from the same seat front row, and then she'll watch 2 times from far stage right, 2 times far stage left. She watches it constantly, and she is a mega super fan. And in her last visit to Drawn to Life, I invited her to what is called Tapis Rouge, which means red carpet. That is the weekly meeting that we have with the cast to go through what's happening on this week, projects coming up, any show notes that I might have for the artists that I haven't touched on individually, and to keep them abreast of things happening in the company, both internally at Drawn to Life and Cirque du Soleil. But I had her come to Tapis Rouge to share her love of what the artists do and what the building, cast, and crew do and what effect that has on people. And something that she was talking about is that, yes, it's done 10 times a night. And as we talked about earlier, the idea is that it's
10 times a week.
10 times, yeah, sorry, not 10 times a night. We'd have no performers left. 10 times a week. But in that, there are so many subtle nuances and so many things that if you see it once, you're blown away. If you see it a second time, now instead of looking downstage right, you're looking upstage left, and you're seeing this small moment that you never noticed before happen, which is a wow. And she said for her, it's about the wow factor that Cirque du Soleil shows have, and that how many wow factors there are within even a single number in a show that's an hour and a half long, and that in coming back and seeing it multiple times, you get a different wow moment each time you see the show. And for her, that's what excites her and keeps her coming back for more. And that's where, for you, I would love for you to come back and see the show a second, third, fourth time, because I think you would see so many beautiful character moments, story moments, funny moments, moments that support the act that you might not have noticed the first time you saw it.
Well, plus also just the way that the seating is set up, it's like kind of 180 degrees around the stage, and you get a different show depending on where you sit. And certainly didn't sit in every seat, but it looked like there was no bad seat in the house.
For sure. Yep.
So that's very cool as well. When it comes to casting these acts, so I know like traditional circus, it's like acts audition as individual acts and then like they're put together to create one show. Are you guys casting individual roles, or are you seeking out certain acts? Because, you have like a unicycle act, and are they coming as groups, or are you casting them individually?
So sometimes yes as a group, and sometimes no. And sometimes it's a partial group combining with individuals from all over the world. So what makes Cirque very unique, and I think a real highlight moment for many people seeing a Cirque du Soleil show that separates it from other shows, is big group acts, where you'll have 12 people performing a banquin number where they're throwing people on top of each other, one on top of the other, on top of the other. Many times those acts are cast with individuals around the world with a super high level in sports acrobatics, and then we're building the number with their expertise, with their talent, and creating something completely unique to Cirque du Soleil. We have the rhythmic gymnastics act in this show. It's on an air track with kind of like a stop motion choreography where you'll see them just like animation and go through. It's incredibly synchronized. They're all rhythmic gymnastics specialists from Japan. Some of them may have worked together before, some of them may have not, but we bring the 6 together and create a unique number to Cirque du Soleil with those 6. Same thing for the Swing to Swing act, the finale act. There are some that have worked together previously in different capacities throughout their time as acrobats, and then others that we bring in that have a specific skill set that we teach, and then we take the entire group and we make a very unique act, not only specific to the world, but specific to this show in Cirque du Soleil. Other times there are acts that the casting team, which is an incredible team that has networks around the world, where they will identify a specific, let's say a solo artist or a duo, and that duo or solo artist will be cast to a show, and then the creative teams and the production team or the operations team will then tailor fit that act to be in the specific Cirque du Soleil show, updating the costume, updating the choreography, sometimes kind of reinventing the wheel and looking at a number and saying, okay, you have these 6 combinations that are excellent. have you ever thought of putting the fourth combination second, or can we combine 2 and 3? Or I saw the way you did it on the fifth combination. Can we tweak these pieces and make it something different and more elevated?
Wow. Where is Cirque du Soleil based?
In Montreal. That is the international headquarters are in Montreal, Quebec.
Do you happen to know like how many Cirque shows are currently running? Whether it's, someplace something that's touring or something that's sitting down, and like not counting, I know they own Blue Man Group and stuff now, but like how many like proper Cirque du Soleil shows are currently running? Do you have any idea?
There are 6 resident shows in Vegas, and then you have a resident show here in Orlando. You have a resident show in Mexico, Hoya, which is a partner show with our partner Vedanta. Then touring shows, we have Curios, Cusa, Corteo, Bazaar, Ovo, Echo. That's the newest Cirque du Soleil touring show that premiered last year, or maybe it was this year in April. I think it did premiere this year in April. So I want to say there are about 12 or 14 shows.
I was going to say that'd be 14. So if six are touring, 6 in Vegas, 1 in Orlando, 1 in Mexico. Wow, that's unbelievable.
And then touring shows both in the traditional big top, which have you seen a show in a big top yet?
I haven't seen a touring production. I've only seen like the ones built for specific theaters.
It is an unforgettable experience because you walk up to, it's like a fairy tale. You walk up to a giant circus tent, just as you would imagine a kid to draw or to see in a cartoon when you're little. And it's fully air conditioned. It has full automation capabilities. You enter the tent and you are in a theater. You would be hard pressed for me to like open your eyes and say, "Hey, are we in a tent?" You would recognize the mass, but for all intents and purposes, it is a theater in a tent. It's so magical. It's pretty incredible what they are able to achieve inside a tent.
I will leave you with this final question, and I know it's a tough one, but do you have, I don't want to use the word favorite because there are no favorites, but is there a specific act in Drawn to Life that you just never get tired of watching?
This is a tough one, and for any of the cast and crew listening, I'm sorry. I think one act that just constantly leaves me with a smile on my face is the unicycle act.
Oh, yes.
It's a team of 5 ladies. Their precision, their grace, their elegance, their presence is just captivating beyond words. And it's so joyful. It has that interesting element and combination of you thinking, okay, I've seen a unicycle. I've seen a kid ride a unicycle, but oh my, I did not know you could do that on a unicycle. Or how can someone do that on a unicycle? But that is kind of washed away by the fact that it's so effortless. You start looking at it a minute in complete disbelief that there's 5 girls doing these insanely intricate unicycle moves, both individually and as a group. And then by the end of the act, for me, I forget that they're even on unicycles. I'm just blown away by the wow factor of all of the presentation, costumes, music, lighting, the acrobatics of the number. And then it finishes and you think, what happened? And then they're gone and you want to see them again.
Since you brought up that specific act, I've got to ask. So we've talked about a lot of, replacing roles and stuff like that. That seems like a very specific skill. So I'm curious, did those 5 women come in as a group already? And if one of them is out for the night, does it become an act of 4? Or are you telling me there's somebody else on the cast that can do that?
No, unfortunately, there's no one else in the cast that can do that. It's an incredibly specific skill and a specific group of people in the world who do unicycle to that level of difficulty. And so they are a team of Japanese ladies. They were brought in individually, and the act was created with these incredibly skilled, top of their game unicyclists. So if unfortunately one was not able to perform that night, we do have various versions of the number where we can do it with 4, where we can do it with 3, where we can do it with 2. There's no one that can just jump on and integrate into that act. It is far too technically complicated. And so if we ever need to cast for that act, it is a very detailed, intense process looking through these unicycle strongholds in Japan and identifying the top talent that will then come to our show and then integrate into the number with 4 ladies. Now, as you can imagine, high-skilled unicyclists in Japan probably know each other. It's a tight-knit community, but working together 10 times a week, 472 shows a year is another beast. And so that is a process of bringing them in, teaching them the number, teaching them the contingencies, and helping them understand how to maintain a show load and the teams and services around to help support them.
I'm relieved to hear you answer it that way because I honestly was like, I know you guys make magic, but I can't imagine if somebody else in the cast is like, yep, I'll go and fill in for that one. I'd be like, what? That's insane, but absolutely wild. Congratulations. It's such a great show. Justin, thank you for taking the time to chat with me today. I know you're super busy, so thank you.
No, thank you. I really appreciate your time, and we'd love to have you out again and get your feedback, seeing the show a second time, third, fourth. So please keep me in the loop if you ever make it out to Orlando again.
Now transitioning from the role of the artistic director to the role of a performer in the show. Andreanne Nadeau performs the role of Mother, but it doesn't stop for her there. You'll hear her discuss her other important roles within the production. Plus, she discusses the audition process, what it's like getting the call when you're cast in a Cirque production, her typical workday, and so much more. Hello, Andreanne, and welcome to Disney Coast to Coast. How you doing today?
Hi, thank you. I'm doing excellent.
Excellent. I'm so happy to have you here, and I'd love to hear a bit more about your role and position with Drawn to Life. So can we just start kind of with your titles and what your responsibilities are?
Yes, absolutely. So first and foremost, I'm one of the artists. I play the role of the mother, so our main character's mom. And I am also an artist coach for artistic. So I work alongside the artistic director and the management teams with all of the artists mostly. And also the acrobatic choreographer for aerial hoop.
Very nice. So I'd love to start really early on at the beginning and talk a little bit about the audition process, because Cirque du Soleil shows in general very much have special skills that all these folks have. So do they come in kind of presenting their special skills, or is it more, we need this, you're auditioning for a specific role, or are you even auditioning for a specific show? Or is it more just like we're having a Cirque open call, we have many shows, let's see where we can place you?
Well, Cirque du Soleil has a huge casting department. And what they do is that they collect and create a Cirque du Soleil database that is filled with the top talents all over the world. So the first step for an artist is to get your material, get your name out there, and make it to that database. Once you are there, I love to keep contact with the casting agents and see what's the new projects coming and whatnot. And then they have a request for, let's say, a new production, a new show coming from the director and his team, and what they want, and what they see acrobatically for what moment. So therefore, they gather all of the best candidates that they have in their database and then present those to the team. And then there's a selection that's made, and then there's a contact that is made with a different artist, and it kind of goes like that.
Okay, so when you're auditioning, you're really not auditioning for a specific Cirque show. You are auditioning for the company.
Yes, I don't know if there is some very specific, there is some time I can only imagine a very specific audition for a specific show that will be held in special event and publicized like that. But in general, as an artist, the main door is to audition to get to the database for any possible future experience or projects.
Very nice. And is this your first show with Cirque, or have you done other shows with them?
I've also been part of the creation of the show I'm a Luna. That was a touring show that opened in 2012.
And where are you originally from?
I'm from Montreal, Canada.
Oh, and that's like home base, right, for Cirque?
Oh, yes, it's the hub.
Excellent. Very cool. Now, let's talk about the rehearsal process. Or actually, let's talk about the call you get, because as you said, you kind of have auditioned for this database talent pool. You just get a call someday saying, hey, we're doing this new show, Drawn to Life. We think you might be right for it. Do you want to take part?
Yeah, it's the most exciting call you get. That's definitely sure. So they kind of want to see, so you were selection. So are you interested or not? So that's always a really good call. So yes, I was very interested. But in the process of Drawn to Life, what I thought was really interesting is that even before I signed the contract, casting contacted me saying they're interested in for me for this position in this show. And then the second call was actually the director and the creation team wanting to meet me. So they called every single artist on the show prior to signing contracts just to talk, get to know the person so that I and we could get to know them, so they can share the project, share their ideas and their dream about it. And so that's how it started. And I thought that was really wonderful. That was a great takeoff for a new creation.
It must be a very exciting phone call to get, but I am kind of curious. I mean, Cirque is all over the world, right? And you get that call and it's like, hey, do you want to do a Cirque show? Yes. Do you want to move to Orlando, Florida? Is that like a question mark for you at that point? Or is it just like, no, the excitement of getting the show is enough to leave home for, an extended period?
Oh, absolutely. As artists, you work all over the world. So I was already always very far away from home. Moving to Orlando, being from Montreal, is actually the closest I've ever worked from home.
Oh, wow.
We're in the same time zone. There's direct flight every day, 3 hours. So to me, it was like the time of my career when that came to me, it was like the perfect timing. I had traveled for 5 to 6 years on tour, lived in my luggage, loved it. All my heart. The experience was amazing. But I was also ready to work and come back to my home every night and be close to my family in some ways.
So after that phone call, how long does it take until like the rehearsal process begins?
Oh, it's many months. They're still when they cast artists, they are still in the process of creating a show with all the heads of all the departments around the table. So I think I got that called maybe I don't know exactly, but at least 6 months before we actually started rehearsing, something like that.
So it's so interesting. It sounds kind of like, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I come from more of a theater world where a show is written and you fill those slots to fit that written show. Whereas with Cirque, it sounds like there's the general concept and idea, but then once the artists are selected, they need time to kind of tailor it to the artists because you all have such specific skills.
Yes, I mean the narrative trame, I don't know how to say that in English, is written. But when you get to really meet the human and the acrobats and what they have to offer, I feel that at Cirque, the creation process creates a huge space for that magic to happen. So yes, we come in with a story and something that our act and our character is there to deliver, but the how that is going to be, it's a very close cooperation between artist and coach and artistic designers and choreographer and director, obviously. So yeah, there's a lot of room to express what the director and the show and the story wants us to express.
So very, very collaborative is what it sounds like.
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly.
All right. So the rehearsal process, how long are you rehearsing the show and where does that take place?
We start rehearsal process in Montreal IHQ. There's humongous studios set up there to rehearse. We can even rehearse many shows at the same time. That's how big the space is. So depending on the act that you are doing, rehearsal process starts around 6 to 8 months prior to premiere for some acrobats, some groups. And as the time goes by, other artists join into the production.
And how close to the opening date do you actually get into the theater to rehearse there?
We were interrupted by COVID. So COVID hit just a couple days before our first premiere, like a week or something. But then we came back and we recreated. So we get into the venue, I would say a couple months before premiere. Most of the work is done in Montreal. We have the whole stage proportion and everything. And then all of this moves to the venue.
Yeah.
And a few months later, we open.
So during that rehearsal process, obviously you all have been studying your physical training for years, your acrobats and masters at whatever your specialty is. But how much emphasis is focused on the acting that comes with it, because there's lots of emoting when it comes to Cirque du Soleil. Is that kind of the tougher part, considering you've trained for years in this physical aspect? Is the acting kind of more difficult for some of the performers?
It's definitely, I cannot speak for everyone, but I think as a general sense, it can be a challenge for lots of artists that comes from like professional sports and competition and things like that, where you are just there to perform specific movement. Now Cirque wants you to do exactly the same thing but have a meaning and have intention and have pleasure and play with that. So it is a learning process, but I think it's very challenging and inspiring and exciting at the same time, because then you bring your performance to a whole new level and you really discover a part of you that you've never touched before, depending what your background is.
And I assume that must be a big focus in the audition process as well, because I'm sure there are many acrobats and such out there who can do the technical aspect, but just can't hit that acting mark. So I assume that's touched upon in that overall database audition, correct?
Clearly, that is qualities that casting agents and directors will be looking out as much as the technical skills level. It's like someone who's an actor who can read, like memorize lines like this, but then delivers them like a news anchor. So you got to have like that good mixed recipe to really
Absolutely.
blow out on stage.
And one of the things about Cirque du Soleil is that the characters communicate with very little language used. I think part of that is because the cast is full of many different languages in general, correct?
Mm-hmm.
And,
Yes.
and so it's a lot of, I don't want to say mime work, but kind of sounds more than words. And can you talk a little bit about that process and learning how to emote with no words?
Well, what we do is physical based. So we cannot take the easy route to then explain what we're going to do physically. It has to be a whole. What I'm doing in my body, yes, it is movement, but by researching exactly what is the essence of what I want to say, what I want the audience to feel when they're looking at me do these movements, that's where our language, you know, just is born, and we make it like evolve and get more clear or not. And we also want to let space for the audience to make up their own story without us telling it in words.
Very nice. Now, some people might think you rehearse the show, you open the show, and then you perform the show. But with the high level skills that you all have, I'm going to assume this takes a lot of maintenance. So I'd love to hear a little bit about what it takes to maintain that level for, the ongoing run of the show.
Maintenance is the key, long-term vision, because we all come. Well, I'm gonna talk for myself. I come from I studied circus art. I come from sports background, dance and everything. So throughout my school years in circus, I was very trained and prepared physically to perform. Then you come to a show, and then that needs to be done every day, 10 times a week. So that's another layer you have to add to your training, which is like really knowing how much to push, how much to rest, how much to stretch, and how much sleep you need. Sleep is the key. What to eat right. So it's all a living that you have to focus towards making your performance at its best for the longest time.
And is that kind of the individual's responsibility, or is that kind of that maintenance something that Cirque du Soleil kind of it ensures is happening?
It's both. I would say it's mostly every artist. We're all professionals, so we need to take on our needs to be able to perform and maintain and sustain the workload. But Cirque du Soleil offers a whole level of support to help us achieve what needs to be done. So I'm talking about extensive PMED department looking out for us, doing a lot of prevention trainings, specialized coaches or conditioning and Pilates and stretching. And so we have it like a full team to support us in whatever is needed for the performance.
It's really remarkable how much goes into a 90-minute show, just like on a day-to-day. Obviously, rehearsals take a long time, development takes a long time, but I think the thing that maybe most people don't get is every single day, there is so much work going into this performance. It's quite remarkable.
It is. And I mean, yes, there is the 60 plus artists on stage. I think we counted roughly, there's like 60 technician and directors, like managers, just for running the show. So that's a lot of people that got to get in sync, like connected on the same thing, and there's so many details. So as much as I'm concentrated to deliver the best act, but I know I have a team of like another 40 people supporting all of the details surrounding it. And that's when everybody's on point and the technology is also with us. And, like there's nothing happening. That's when the magic happens. So it takes a lot more than just the person that we're looking at on stage at that moment.
Yeah, and speaking of magic, I want to talk to you a bit about your hand-to-hand act, which is brought to life with some Disney and Cirque du Soleil magic. And this is a beautiful scene where you're floating through the air and you have a dance partner. And what the audience sees is truly breathtaking and it's a magical moment. But I'm sure you see it from a much more technical point of view. But I'm curious, have you ever seen it with somebody else performing, obviously, from the audience's point of view?
Oh, yes, absolutely. I did. Yeah, because I am the mother, but the original couple was Miriam and Sam, who went on another project, and I was their backup. I was the mom's backup since the opening, and I was in love totally with that act since the first day they started creating it. I was like, wow, this is beautiful. It's so magical. It's so poetic. And that's one thing I really love about Cirque is that you've got the highest, like crazy acrobatic performance, but then you also have like these random performance that just like are not like typical circus, but they just bring you in this like magical, dreamy universe. And it just like meshes with the Cirque aesthetic so nicely. So when I had the opportunity to have this role as my main character, I had not 1 second of hesitation.
So you got to see it first as an audience member and really take in that breathtaking moment. Can you feel that when you're doing it? Because I know you're like performing and it's a technical thing and, there's magic involved. But can you like kind of strip that away and feel what the audience is seeing in that moment?
Oh, absolutely. And what's really great about where it's happening, like where it's placed in the show, is that before me, if you go back a little bit, I'm in the wings at this moment, but there's the whole wheel of terror that's happening, and the people are so scared. And I hear the crowd like scream, like, scare. So that happens, and everybody's like, heart is pounding and everything. And then right after that, I'm still in the ramp. Clown act starts. So after being very scared, like now the audience laugh and they embark with mishesitation and the kids are laughing. So you see the emotional journey. So they are scared, they laughed, and then boom, we go into that very slow moment. The music is soft. And then this magic starts happening and there's levitation and there's just a simple couple on stage. It's very pure. So that's silent. The silence during my act is actually, that's what's filling me. Because that's exactly where the directors and all of his team, that's where they were seeing it, that emotional journey. Like people are just, after feeling strong emotion to really like, just like sit down and have a moment. And it's a good like 6 minutes, of like calm and just lets them breathe and it's full of love. So yeah, I feel it.
That brings up an interesting point as far as placement of these acts, because you do want those roller coaster of emotions. So when you're rehearsing these different acts, is there a general, idea of where they're going to be placed already? Or is that really part of the rehearsal process of let's figure this out. Let's get that roller coaster going?
Now, I would say they are already placed in the show narrative. Sometimes it could happen that the directors and the team will decide to shuffle things around, but most in general, it is already like the opening is going to be this followed by GTT, and they do take enormous care of that emotional journey throughout the show.
I'm sure Cirque or like the team are masters at that at this point. They've done enough shows that
They've done it.
they
They've
get
done it
it.
a few times. Yeah.
Yeah, you got to hit these points. So now you also are coach and deal with the training for the aerial acts. Can you talk a little bit about that process?
Yes. So that was aerial hoops was an addition to the show, addition to a scene that was already part of the show. It's called The Dream of Colors, which is performed by a duo Russian cradle performer. So it's literally a porter, a basic guy that swings and throw the partner up in the air while she flips and turns and it catches her bag by the hand, by the feet. And we have a very big stage in this theater. So they wanted to add even more colors to the Dream of Colors. So there was room downstage platform to add some aerials. And there's something about the circle because the cradle wheel is performed in a big, big wheel that kind of represents, like a color palette.
Mm-hmm.
So the aerial hoops by them shapes were also a nice link to that circle of colors, circle spectrum theme. So we added this number last January to be a composition, extra composition in the Cradle Act.
Nice. How often does the show get changed up like that? I mean, I know there are slight changes each night due to, perhaps some casting issues at the moment, but like, how often will the show be looked at, or any Cirque show, I guess, and say, hey, let's make some tweaks here and there? Because once again, I come from the theater world where it's like a Broadway show is locked and it pretty much stays like that until the end of its run. Mm-hmm. But it sounds like Cirque may not work that way.
No, I think Cirque's vision is to always keep evolving with the show, with the needs, with how can it be the best that we can give to the audience. So it doesn't change that much, but they are not afraid to change things when it feels like needed.
That's cool.
So I would say every show has been through adjustment, and the ones that have been running for like huge amount of years, they with time would like the narrative again will remain the same. The look is the same, but the elements inside are malleable.
Nice. And I've talked a little bit about this with Justin about, swings and doubles and adjustments to the show each night, depending on, who's available or who might be out of the show. And I just love to hear from a performer's point of view. What's it like to get that call and say, hey, you're doing this role tonight instead of that one? I mean, is it terrifying? It seems like the most difficult job is being the replacement for a specific role.
As an artist, I'll be very honest. To be the backup of another character is one of the biggest tasks you can take on because you need to do your main track, your main character, day after day, 10 times a week. And on top of that, you need to always be ready to jump in your backup role. So you need to maintain that, but you're not performing in it as often as the other ones. So therefore, you don't get as comfortable, or at least it takes you a lot longer to get to that point. So it is hard, but at the same time, so rewarding and challenging. And when you get to do the same thing day after day, having a little change in the routine, just like you, shakes things up and makes it really interesting, in my opinion. But it comes with work. But I think we're mostly all love that challenge and we all love to work. So,
yeah, I can imagine that must just be scary. And, when you do take over a role, are you allowed to make small adjustments to like, suit your skills, or is it very, very specifically choreographed where it's like, no, you're going to be hitting this exactly like the regular performer?
Well, that all depends. Some moments of some acts may permit may allow for slightly changes because, no two bodies or no two performers are exactly the same. So maybe this one movement on me, it just doesn't go, or I cannot do that, but I could do this instead. So that is possibilities. And it's all work that we do with the coaches and with Justin, the artistic director, to really come up with the best backup version that backup can provide, knowing that it's a different individual.
I have one final question for you. I'd love to hear briefly what it's like for a typical day in the life of a drawn to life performer. You wake up, how do you get ready for the show? When are you showing up to the theater? How do you warm up? All of that stuff.
Okay. So me, I'm not the typical because before I jump and I put my artist hat, I'm an artist coach.
Mm-hmm.
So I come into theater on average a lot earlier than the show call. But my typical day is get up at 8 or 9 in the morning. And that's the 1 hour where I do nothing and just have my breakfast and coffee. That's like the downtime. This is when it's happening because then that's it. And then do little things around the house. And then around 11 or 12, I leave, come to work. And I will usually either have coaching, some teaching, some meetings, some Zoom calls until 4. And then at 4 is when I switch my hats and then I start my makeup. So from 4 to 5, I do makeup and hair. It's also another down chill moment. And then by 5, I'm standing by. First show starts at 5:15 for me. The real show starts at 5:30. And then we do our first show. And luckily, I just have like the perfect amount of time. So when I go for my first cue, right after that, I have like a good big 45 minutes. And that's where I will do my warm up, preparation, mental state preparation, conditioning, whatever I need to do that day. Do my act. Then we're close to the end, finish first show. Then we have a break, about 45 minutes for myself, where I'll have a little bite, retouch my makeup, and then boom, go again for the second show. So same thing, first cue, change of costume, conditioning, stretching a lot in the second show, second performance, end of the show, take your makeup off, and basta.
And you're doing that
again 5 days a week.
5 days a week. Wow. Unbelievable. Well, Andreanne, thank you so much for taking the time to chat. This has been super insightful, and congrats on the show. It's a wonderful show.
Thank you so very much. It was a pleasure.
Thanks for tuning into this episode, and thanks to Justin and Andreanne for taking the time to chat. Don't miss any future episodes by subscribing and following Dizney with a Z, coast to coast on your favorite podcast app, where episodes are available 24/7. If you're a longtime listener of the show, thank you. And if you have the means, consider supporting the show over on Patreon. By joining Dizney Coast to Coast's Patreon membership, you'll gain access to extra bonuses, including live stream Ask Me Anythings, unreleased episodes, and more bonus content. Take a look at all that's available by clicking the Patreon link in this episode's description, and thank you for considering. Until next time, anything you need can be found in this episode's description, from additional information and links discussed in this episode found in the show notes, to the DCTC hotline where you can leave a voicemail and be heard on a future episode, contact info to reach me, access to the show's official website, some free gifts from me to you, and so much more. So be sure to check out this episode's description. Other than that, folks, have a magical day. Bye!